Hi everyone. I know that there is a lot of reasons for folks to be joining us tonight and taking that time. Thank you all so much for doing that. Some of you all might be worried, upset, determined, and very justifiably angry. And some of you are joining this call after only recently becoming engaged in the movement for Black Lives and looking for resources and connection. Some of you all have been working with racial justice and against police brutality for decades. But, you know, as I look through the screen, I see a community of dedicated rural Oregonians, and that is really what's important.
No new deaths.
If it's possible for you to mute there at the beginning, there we go. But I also, as we talk about how important that is, I just also think that it's important for us to remember that while those of us that are white might be feeling uncomfortable or feel that this is a really scary time, and it is important to remember that this is what Black people have been experiencing in their daily lives for hundreds of years, and that cannot be repeated enough. But to those that are new, we say welcome, and to those that are returning and have been organizing with us for almost 3 decades, we say thank you. Rural Organizing Project is a network of over 65 autonomous volunteer-run groups across rural and small-town Oregon who are organizing for human dignity and democracy. ROP is a multiracial network, and this call is a direct response to leaders of color demanding that folks take action now. We are seeing really powerful demonstrations across rural Oregon and the country that are insisting that Black Lives Matter, calling for an end to racism and police brutality. And at least 50 protests and vigils are planned in 25 counties across rural Oregon. And those are just the ones that we know about. This has been in, yeah. And this has been in response to calls from the Movement for Black Lives to organize a week of action in defense of Black lives. And these are the things that the Movement for Black Lives is calling for and what our demands are. Can you share that with everybody? So we demand the rights of protesters be respected. We demand a divestment from the police and the investment in Black communities. We demand local schools, colleges, universities, and all public institutions cut ties with the police. We demand immediate relief for our communities. We demand community control. We demand an end to the war against Black people, and we will be making meaning out of this moment of crisis. If you go to the Movement for Black Lives website, you will find this list and be able to read more details about each of these points. You can visit the Movement for Black Lives website by going to ILM4, that's the number 4, BL.org. Again, that is ILM4, that's the number, BL.org. Thank you for sharing that slide. So one of our jobs is figuring out what these demands, figuring out what to do with them and put plans in place for organizing in our communities to end white supremacy. ROP staff would love to strategize with you about what it looks like to organize on those demands. So please, after this call, give us a shout and we would be happy to talk with you more about that. If you could please put into the chat box what you shared with your partner and you're comfortable with sharing with the larger group on why you joined the call tonight, that would be great. If you're not familiar with how to use the chat box, if you move your mouse or your cursor to the bottom middle of the screen, or that's the top middle if you're on an iPad, you'll see a chat box button, and if you click on it, a chat box will pop up. If you can't find the button at the bottom or of your computer screen or the top of your tablet screen, then click the button that looks like 3 little dots in a horizontal row, and that should show you the chat setting. So let's give folks just a few seconds to go ahead and enter something in there. If you're on the phone, you won't have the chat option available to you, but you can send me any thoughts you want to share to my email address, which is sasha@rop.org. I'll spell my name, and it's on the screen too, but S-A-S-H-A, sasha@rop.org if you're by phone, or if you just would rather not share your comments in the public chat box. All right, while people are finishing up doing that part, I'm going to go ahead and move on with the agenda, because we want to get to the part where you all get to talk with each other. So we are really appreciative that you all are here with us today to strategize and dig deep and use the momentum of this moment to further racial justice while keeping each other and our neighbors safe as possible. This movement that is demanding action from all of us, which this call is a broader part of, is in direct response to the multiracial leadership of ROP. And I know that in Oregon specifically, we've been seeing heavily armed white supremacist militias creating counter protests and patrolling the streets of our small towns across the state. Just kind of raise your hand if it came up in your pair share or if you've seen that happening. Armed militias and dudes with guns. Yeah, that is a lot of us that's been seeing that. So you all deeply understand the importance of this call. So thank you again for joining us. Now for the rest of the call, we're going to hear from a few just straight up amazing organizers. We're going to hear from Ajamu, Lisa, and Bart, and then after that, we're going to be spending the bulk of our time sharing out and strategizing together as a group. So first is Ajamu Umi. Could you take a moment and introduce yourself and then just dive on in?
I certainly can. And I need to ask you, Sasha, if it's you or whomever, if I could share a screen in a minute or so, because I have slides to use. But hi, everybody.
I believe so. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Ajamu Umi. I know some of you. I am in Sacramento, California, but I used to live in Portland. And when I lived in Portland up through 2016, I did a lot of work with ROP. If you recall, back at that time, it was during the militias occupying the Malheur area in Southeast Oregon. So there were a lot of attacks against the work ROP was doing. And I was asked to help organize security for a number of events throughout rural Oregon. And we did that on a number of occasions for many different ROP events. So I'm here today to talk to you specifically about some best practices for security. And so we'll do that in a second, but I just wanted to say that what you all are doing, like in organizing these events, is extremely important. I was in my session just now with Sarah, who's in Malawi there, and I was telling Sarah the same thing, that you know, it's not as a big risk to be in Sacramento, California, 1 million people. You know, everybody lives here, and to be as radical and revolutionary as I certainly believe that I am. And it's not a risk to do that, but what you all do in the rural parts of Oregon, it has a major consequence on how it impacts your day-to-day life. And, you know, I recognized that when I was doing all the work with ROP. So I just want to salute you for that and say much respect for you for stepping out there. It's very important. It's very important what you're doing. And then the other thing before we start with the slides is, you know, there's this dichotomy, right? Like you have, what you're doing is getting out and you're making a confrontation against injustice. And that's what needs to happen when there's injustice. There needs to be a confrontation against it. But just keep in mind that there's a balance that exists. Like I saw someone in the chat had said, you know, how do we organize in pro-police communities? So, you know, there's a variety of tactics, and, you know, there's more than just the march and rally. That's not the only way you can do that. You know, sometimes you can do it just as effectively with teach-ins, with a series of meetings at people's houses. You know, that's the kind of thing you just have to decide. But I just wanted to put that out there, that you have the opportunity to, to do that. And then the confrontation piece, people, even if you're just marching peacefully, you all understand that there are elements that see that as a confrontation. So that's important too, and I think that hopefully this gives you some inspiration. But my training comes primarily from people who were in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Primarily people like Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael, who, if you don't know him, you should look him up. He was the poster child face of the Black Power movement in the 1960s in this country. And one of the things he used to always talk to me about was when they would go into those small racist towns in Mississippi and Alabama, they would go out on a street corner and they would just start passing out flyers. And this was something that was unheard of for African people to do, at that time, still is in a lot of those areas. And that's why they did it tactically. They just went out there and they knew there was going to be problems for them by doing it, but it was all about instilling in the people that you just can't be afraid. So what I said about, having the meetings in your houses and doing different tactics, that's important, but it's also even more important to demonstrate to the communities that you don't need to be afraid, that if we come together, that's our best strength. So just want to say that, much respect to you. And then I'll just pull up these slides and go through them. And then I just want to say, I'm going to stick around. So, if there are questions or conversations afterwards, I'll be here to hopefully help you feel, more comfortable with whatever it is that comes up. So first, I'll just say, whatever type of event you're planning, and I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming that most of the time you're talking about the typical march and rally type focus, that type of Black Lives Matter focus. That's a beautiful thing. But just some of the things to think about when you're preparing for that, because I know you're concerned about, well, what people are going to come out. And as I mentioned to you, I saw that in Oregon, in rural towns. I went with ROP to places like John Day and Redmond and all those places in Oregon. So I know exactly, I've experienced that. And being, the one African person on security there, I garnered a lot of attention. So I understand, I have a good understanding of what your concerns are. And so what I'm going to talk about now is just some ways to be, to prepare for that. And so the first thing is, it would be great if you had a team of people you could get together. This is before your event, before your rally. Ideally, you want to have 2 people for every 50 people that you anticipate showing up. So if you have 400 people, you want to have at least 16 people available. The more, the merrier, but at least that many. If you can't have that many, just get as many people as you can. And these are people who are, people that are going to be dedicated to staying with the event from beginning to end. If they're people that can only come for a few minutes and leave, these are not the people that you want to have on this team. You want to have people that are going to be, totally focused on being there. And the purpose of this team that you get together is you want to have them be a watch team to watch for problems. So what that means is that their responsibility is going to be to watch the audience and the people on the side. They're not going to be, if you have a rally, they're not going to be looking at the speaker, listening to the speaker, clapping. They're not going to be participating like that. Their role is to watch the crowd, watch the people around the crowd, and to pay attention for anything unusual that may happen. So, in order for someone to do this effectively, they kind of have to be somebody that has that kind of discipline to be able to do that. If it's somebody who, 2 minutes of doing that and then they need to go, sit down in the sun, then that's probably not the person you want to have doing this particular assignment. So make sure that that's the case. That's very good if you can ensure that, you have people like that. And then have the team members easily identified, if you have the vest, the yellow vest or green vest or whatever, that's good. If you have tape that says, team team spirit or whatever name you want to come up with, that's good, but just some way that identifies everybody that's on that team so that everybody sees them. The best deterrent to problems is a presence and visibility. And, when we were doing the events at ROP, and I know some of you on there, I saw Michael's on here, he was there, he knows this. When we were going to, some of these places where we had these places where Jessica spoke, like Medford, we would stand out there to make sure that people saw us before they came in there. They knew we were there, and that, based on our presence and our energy, like we were there to stop problems from happening. And these folks would come in there with the Confederate flags and the swastikas and all of that. And, I would stand at the door and I would look each and every one of them in the face. I would smile at them. And that was, this is the psychology of security. Like and then we always had tables at the events where people had to sign in, and the people at the tables looked at the people and smiled at them and talked to them. So, all of this, you may not think it is, but this is all security work, because what you're doing is you're establishing, like, I see you, I know you. Like, if you act a fool in here, I know who you are. I see you, I can identify you, and I'm aware of you, and then I'm not afraid. All of those things are important psychological elements for securing anything that you're doing. And then, if possible, I know you probably don't have time for this, but even if before the event, even 30 minutes before the event, you can do some training, and it can just be conflict de-escalation training. So everybody at least develops a comfort level, and that can consist of just having people know that if they see somebody that's agitated, just having a quick plan on how to deal with them. If that means just having someone go talk to them, whatever you decide that to be, or if you just consolidate and know that they're there and stay away from them, whatever you decide to do, just making sure everybody is on the same page and knows what to do. And we can talk more about that if you like. And it's good if possible, depending on what your setup is, this may not be a reality, but if you can have a table or a tent or something that identifies your team, like, first aid tables, team safety, if that's your name, this is our table. Just having that there. And then the most important element to this, because again, 90% of security is psychological. And a lot of the people that, this was my experience coming there, like a lot of the people who would come with the guns and everything, like a lot of these people, some of them are unhinged, of course, but a lot of these people they're not the most courageous people. That's why they have to bring guns to events where it's not even about guns, it's about people's rights. So, you have to have yourself in a psychological place where fear is common, it's normal. You don't eliminate fear, but you have to be in a place where you cannot let fear overcome you. And so that's why it's important to, have that presence and that energy, like I'm not afraid, and to really like work with yourself to get yourself to a place where you can do that. I know it wasn't easy for me up there, here all these people, these swastikas, and I'm the only, African in there. Like that's not an easy place for me, but I just told I told myself I'm here to do what's right, and whatever happens, that's what it's going to be. That's going to be my legacy. And I can live with that because that's important to me. So whatever it is you have to do to, get yourself in that mental headspace, that's very important. And so this last part is along with that, like if you have a rally and there's a moderator, or if there are people on a march and there are people with megaphones or whatever way you have it set up so that people are communicating with people, it's important that that person or those persons consistently reiterate that there's a team safety here. We have all our identified members, raise your hand, team safety. They're here for the community. They're here because we're here about peace. They're here because we're here to build community. And that's what we're here for. And just constantly saying that, because that has a tremendous psychological impact on the people present. I don't care who it is. Like I've used that technique when we've done events here in California in gang territories. And it's been very effective at keeping gangs from, engaging in conflict with one another, because you're constantly reiterating, because no matter who somebody is, deep down inside, everybody wants peace. So even if they don't know they want it, they do want it. So you're speaking to that element of them by constantly reiterating that. So that's very important to have whoever is there pointing that out constantly. So it creates a culture there. And what you'll do by that is that even people that aren't a part of your event will subconsciously take on responsibility to ensure that everything's safe. And they'll help you with security, even though they didn't intend to do that. So that's critically important. And then having the team members, again, walking around and staying constantly visible. Even if I've done events where we had 2 or 3 people and we just walked in front of everybody back and forth. And even that has a psychological impact. Because what people see is like, wow, there's a lot of security there, even though it's just 2 or 3 people. So it's all about, that image of maintaining that. When the Cuban Revolution was happening and Fidel Castro and Che Guevara were in the Sierra Maestras in the city of Santiago in 1956, they only had 11 or 12 people to start with. And the media people from the New York Times came and they just marched everybody in a circle in front of the camera to make it look like they had a lot of people. So, again, a lot of this is psychological. So use that to your advantage. And so, this is just the top picture is blurred, but I just put it in here. I wanted to show you all. This was African Liberation Day here in Sacramento years ago. And the gentleman on the right is Tupac Shakur, who was performing. And you can't see me because the person in white is blocking me, but I'm standing there behind the stage, and we were providing security for this event. And this is one of those examples where we only had 5 or 6 people, and there were like 5,000 people there, and everybody wanted to get on stage and be with Tupac. But we were able to use these tactics I'm talking to you about, and we didn't have any problems at all. So, make sure you talk through, like, what's your course of action if a problem develops? Like if someone starts heckling, what are you going to do? You can do a number of things and we can talk about what you can do, but the important thing is whatever you do, everybody's on the same page and is prepared to do it. That's the important thing with that. The other thing is, what is your form of communication for your team? Will you have radios? Will you have, how are you going to be able to communicate with each other? And then taking 10 minutes to establish a method of communication, like code words. Like if you see someone acting up, you should have a code word to identify that so you can say it in the radio. Like when we were doing the RLP tours, I spent a lot of time in Ghana, West Africa, so I speak Fante. So the team we had, we would use the word Batuiwawa, which means crazy white person. And so whenever somebody came into the events that had a swastika or something that identified them as white supremacists, I'm at the door, I would speak in the radio, Batuiwawa. That person doesn't know what I'm saying, but all the people on our security team knew, okay, be on alert for this person that comes through the door. Or if I saw they had a weapon on them or whatever it was. So just have your language in place. And then practice that, have your, like I said, have your watchword, do that. And then establish like what your plan is going to be. Like if things go sideways, have a plan. It's not your fault if things go sideways, but we should always have a plan for if this happens, this is what we're going to do, and something everyone understands that you talked through before. And then you have to practice all these things. If you don't practice like what your escape plan is, what your plan is for interacting with hostile people, it's very difficult to do it if you don't role play it and practice it. You have to do that. So I'll just stop there. I don't want to take up too much time, but like I said, however the structure is you have for, questions or anything like that, I'm going to stick around and hopefully can help you all feel as prepared as you possibly can be.
Thank you so much. And I feel like you could have continued for quite a while and people would have been very interested to hear everything you were saying. We've already got lots of comments and questions coming in for you. So thank you for that. So next, Lisa and Bart, are you both of you all on?
Yeah, I'm on. Lisa, do you want to jump in there?
Well,
Oh, you're on mute, Lisa.
Sorry, I thought I
There you go.
unmuted myself. Lots of good information. I guess maybe, I don't know, Bart, if you feel like maybe something that we can offer is that this is the kind of stuff we've been grappling with in our own community for the last, what, 2.5 years, maybe?
Mhm.
And it's been
Um,
really important for us. We established a rapid response group. Can people hear me? Or am I freezing?
yeah, could you and Bart take just a minute and introduce yourselves and give folks
Oh,
a little bit of
I'm
context for who you are? No, you're fine, Lisa.
I'm Lisa Gonzalez. I'm in Corvallis, as is Bart. Both Bart and I, and I'll let you introduce yourself too, are part of a group called Rapid Action Community Response, RACER for short. We formed about, what, 2.5 years ago? Am I right
Yeah.
about that? And we did it in response to growing presence of neo-Nazi activity in our community, and also the increasing threat of ICE activity in our community. Both those things were coming out in force at the same time. So that's who we are. So we gathered a group of folks who were interested in figuring out what it means to do some rapid response group work in our community. Bart, let you.
Yeah, I got to thank Ajamu because I worked briefly with him on one of their appearances down here in Albany, I guess it was. But the material he just put out really forms the basis of what we use to develop some local procedures that we put in place for a few events that we did here. And I just want to underline the notion that you got to keep emphasizing the fact that you're building community here. That's why we call our practice, the one that we developed locally, called watchful hospitality, because we did not just want to be watchful and be security people. We also wanted to be known as the welcoming group, you know, so it's hard to do both sometimes. But, and the other thing that I would throw in, one of the things that we confronted was, you also have to be prepared for allies in the group that may overreact to whoever, you know, the Nazis or whoever shows up with signs or what have you. So I don't, you know, you just need to have that in mind that, you know, sometimes the people, the disruptors are there to try to egg on and try to get some kind of response. And if the allies know that you're there to help keep things together, maybe they won't give them that response that they're looking for. Otherwise, thank you very much, Ajamu. That was a fantastic presentation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something that you talked about, Ajamu, which is that people, if you clearly put out there that you're establishing this safety presence, that people will start to find themselves identifying with that culture, and they will help. And we've actually gotten a lot more conscious about that step of talking with folks, often even preparing before events, so that we try to get people on board. If this is what you want, it's not just about us folks that are kind of hanging at the perimeter and moving around and being observers, but it's also about everybody participating in this kind of consciousness of caring for everybody else. So we even we learned to do this through some fire with ROP events, but having like a word so that people, and sharing that at a gathering beforehand, so that if somebody, say at a march, sees something, that they have a code word that they can say that they can recognize, whatever that is, you know. I don't know, whatever that crazy code word that you come up with together, so that people that are there can identify that they're feeling comfortable about something too. So I think it's been really useful for us. We've taken on more of a role of helping other groups in our community learn how to do this. So we've kind of offered informal trainings to folks and help them think about how you as a group can marshal your energies around this, because it's just, right now, it's just essential. We all need to be thinking in these terms. So that's been really useful. And I'll say, you said you have to have a form to communicate, and we use radios. And we actually even got a little city money, grant money to buy more radios, so that we could share them out with groups when they're planning their events and deciding how they're going to do their own safety work. Is there something else, Bart, that you can think of that kind of, I mean, you did a great job at John.
Oh.
I mean,
Nothing else for me.
Before we switch over to the group conversation, can you all just go a little bit more into what watchful hospitality is and why you call it that?
Well, I guess the focus, if you will, it could sort of paint the picture, sort of as Ajamu mentioned. If you have, you know, a check-in table where, you know, some of the folks that are responsible for security could be standing at the check-in table, or maybe there's a central sort of entrance to the area if you're in a park, if you're outside, but someplace where you would not only be welcoming people in, holding doors if you sometimes, but also sort of scoping people out, engaging with folks as they come to the door. Because some of the disruptors, you know, they may try to stay on the down low, but if you get somebody looks a little odd, or you're just not sure, you just strike up a conversation, and pretty soon it might become clear. So you're really fulfilling both roles at once. You're being watchful, you're trying to be aware of who's coming through the door or into the park, but you're also trying to be welcoming, and as Ajamu said, smile. You know, be friendly, and be amazed at what comes out.
Yeah, I think for us, we've really emphasized that this is a community, part of our community, the roles we play in our community, and we need to. And so it's really kind of saying we're part of everybody else, even in those moments where we seem like we're on the periphery because we're not participating, we're more watching what's going on. But I think for us, it's, you know, really emphasizing that we're all in it, you know, we're all community members in this together. So that's I think a big piece of our consciousness when we're doing this work and talking to folks about it. And I loved what you said, Ajamu, about practice, because we've been emphasizing that more and more, not just having a plan, but doing some practicing some de-escalation techniques, you know, really having some clear plans, because you will, even if it only happens once in a blue moon, if we're lucky, that moment when you really do have to confront, you know, at some energy that's really being antagonistic. It's important that everybody's very clear about what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, you know, who can stand and do some direct confrontation if necessary, and who needs to do the backup work. So all those things folks really need to sort of plan for together before an event, if it's possible.
That was great. Thank you all. You all have done just a tremendous job. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Emily and Dancer.
Hi, I'm Dancer. I'm the newest ROP staff. I'm going to start with asking Ajamu to talk a little bit about some resources for learning de-escalation techniques, because that's the thing that's coming up in the chat box over and over.
Yeah, so I think the best way to do it in this virtual environment that we find ourselves in right now is to just establish some time, like have some time where you can get people together and talk specifically about de-escalation techniques. So, you know, what that would look like is coming into a meeting like this and having someone facilitate some scenarios, and then just having people, you know, in your own space, like walk through what you would do. And, you know, I'm certainly able, anything for ROP. So if that's something you all want to do, I'm certainly able and willing to, you know, perform that facilitator role. And we can do it, you know, it can be 30 minutes, but it's just designed to help people figure out, okay, this is my role and responsibility if I'm de-escalating something and something happens. And so we can walk people through what your role and responsibility would look like, you know, in the event that something happens, and just practice it with people a few times until people get a comfort level with it. So if that works for you all, that would be the best way that I can think of to do that. And again, I work for a labor union, so I'm in my house every day working, but I have flexible schedules, so I'm pretty much available. I'm just looking at my birds and they look at me all day. So you know, if you all want to do something like that, it's just let me know and I'm perfectly willing to do it.
Thank you. So I'd like to hear from folks, what is your group taking action on? What does racial justice organizing look like in your community now and long term?
Are you asking for voice messages or the text box?
I think you can respond in voice.
Okay, so I can't speak for everybody in my community, but from what I've seen, I'm in Klamath Falls, Oregon. We've had 2 big protests, right? We've had 2 big protests, one on Sunday, one on Monday. Sunday was met with more armed militia than there were protesters. We actually had a standoff. Police were involved. Several people were arrested. There was a lot of violence, even in this small town. And so for me, as part of this community, I would like to see more cohesion, more community togetherness, more community involvement, less police presence. And of course, racial justice means attacking police brutality on a broad scale. I'm thankful that because I live in a small town, we personally don't see a lot of that. So it would be more of cohesion between the militia members and concerned, more left-leaning community members.
Thank you.
What town did you say you were in?
I'm in Klamath Falls.
Klamath Falls, I got you. Southern or southeastern Oregon.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
I
kind
didn't
of
grow up here.
It's kind of south central. We're only an hour and a half off the I-5.
Okay.
My name's Courtney. I actually live in Oakland, California, but my mother lives in Medford. And I have decided to work and study from here this summer to see what impact I can make here. And it's my first day joining a meeting, trying to understand what that is. So when, if I can provide another body at a demonstration elsewhere in the state this summer, that's something I'd like to do. So if anybody wants to drop a message with any recommendations for how to link up in Medford, that would be great.
I'm gonna say something. My name's Kayla. I live in Grants Pass and work in Medford. So Courtney hit me up. I would say I went to the protest on Monday and spoke. It was organized just by kind of one individual. So I would say like in Southern Oregon right now, the protests are pretty decentralized. And so that's kind of why I'm on this, is we don't really have like an organization or anything. And to just be frank, which, obviously this is an issue in rural Oregon. It's all very, it's white led, and it's doing a lot of centering white voices that don't necessarily need to be centered in this specific talk. So I definitely would like to also just kind of offer that to the group of how Black voices can be centered a little bit more in rural areas, because that's something that obviously is, I personally believe is pretty important.
Thank you, Kayla.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna, Lenora.
Speak up.
Oh, I was gonna talk about, I'm in Forest Grove, Oregon, and we've been doing a lot of protests lately, but I wanted to kind of, what Kayla said really, I really connected with, because ours started as a very decentralized thing too. It was one young woman and her mother who decided to stand in front of the library with signs, and they texted some of us that they know, and we started standing with them, and then other people in the community saw it, and it grew. And so by Monday, I think we had 300 people at the flagpole in our town. The main leadership is a group of young Latinx women. And I totally am, I'm the mother of one of them, and I'm trying to support them as much as possible, kind of in the background. But one of the challenges that they've had is they've gotten some criticism from other Latinx folks in the community that it needs to be more Black centered. And you know, we've done something, or they have done some really good things of bringing in some video clips and, you know, some things to center Black voices more. But in our community, you know, it's a very limited Black population, and it's kind of a scary place for Black folks to stand up as well. So anyway, those are some things we're struggling with in our situation as well.
Lenore, were you wanting to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll say something. I wanted to jump in, Kayla, and thank you for that. I live in Florence, Oregon, which is like, you know, 50% retired white people. And we were out on our Indivisible, well, there was a number of people that joined the Indivisible group. And we were out on what I call protest corner. It's been going on for years. People just stand on Highway 101 and 126 and wave signs. And we were all out, and it was very positive. But we had 2 people of color that came. I mean, there were no people of color in the protest. And 2 came up on the sidelines and thanked us, and were taking photos. But I want to be, and there are very few Black people in the community, and our Latino folks, they just really never come out. They don't at all. They work in the forest, and they don't come out in the restaurants, and they don't ever join us. But anyway, I would like to find a way to welcome people of color in, so it's more Black centered and not just a bunch of white folks waving signs. Thanks.
Somebody else want to jump in here?
I will jump in.
Go for it.
Come on, Patricia.
Okay, so I'm in McMinnville, Oregon, and I just have nothing but goodness to share. We had a young woman here in the community, a young woman of color, who is a doula and a yoga teacher, or studying to be a yoga teacher, just come forth and organize a vigil for this past Monday night. And the first people she invited, well, I don't know if they were the first, but the police were involved with us. So we created this incredible event where the chief of police was present and fielded questions, some very direct questions about what kind of changes and what their practices are and all of that. And people came up. We had an opportunity for everybody to go up and share just their feelings, because it was a very loaded evening, but there was no sign of any negativity at all. It was there was probably, I'm gonna say, between 200 and 300 people attending the vigil. And then the very next day, on Tuesday, we had a protest that was created by the high school students. And there was more than 500 people at that protest. There are other people on this call right now from McMinnville who know what I'm talking about, and probably they might want to say something too. But the action that has come out of this in the community is all so positive. I'm part of a group and was on a Zoom call this morning where there was 30 of us, and we're talking about the possibility of creating a chapter of SURGE. Y'all know what SURGE is. I think ROP is a member of it. It stands for Stand Up for Racial Justice, and it's a national organization. And I'm just telling you, people are waking up. They're watching the right movies. We've just seen no signs of anything that I've heard described tonight.
I want to move us into the next question is, what challenges are your groups coming up against other than the kind of organized opposition? What are your other challenges?
Hi, is this working? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I'm Emily. I'm in Salem, Oregon. Like many other people have said, first of all, I wanted to address Salem is it's a larger city. It's our capital city, but to me, it feels more rural because we don't have a lot of organizing infrastructure in place, like a lot of people have spoken about. And so many of the demonstrations that have happened are very grassroots. One of the first vigils too was really just organized by the staff of a restaurant, a Black-owned restaurant here in town that cared. They organized a small vigil, and the ball's been rolling since then. One of the issues that we are having is that the Salem Police Department has enacted curfews, and they're not enforcing those curfews equally. So we do have white armed militants that are in Salem, and they're out. They come to our protest, then they kind of post up downtown nearby for if people do march by later. It's very threatening. And then at the time, the police have enforced a curfew against folks who are demonstrating, but not against folks who are armed militants who are out threatening the demonstrators. That's been really frustrating. We're working with the press and talking with police about this. I guess the police chief made a statement that he was okay with that and then retracted the statement. But, it's pretty scary. I think that's sort of it. And
the police chief gave his explanation, which was the worst excuse ever and so not believable.
Right.
I'm here with you, Emily, in Salem, and it's just maddening.
We see that Kagan has had their hand up for a little bit. Kagan, do you want to share?
Oh no, I didn't mean to have my hand up.
Oh, well, we saw your comments in the chat. Do you want to share those pieces? Not to put you on the spot. I can read them out if you'd prefer.
I just like to take a moment and remember that when you do organize in white spaces and there's police involved, that can make a lot of folks feel unsafe. And so to criticize people of color for not participating is something as white people we should think about not doing.
Thank you.
Can I go off of Kagan's comments?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really glad you spoke up, Kagan. I come from a family of immigrants, and a lot of the reasons that Latinos and Latinas do not show up is because they fear being deported, and having police presence and being in a community that is not made for you, that is not built for you, a country that is not built for you. It's really difficult to show up, especially if there is the fear of being deported. It doesn't mean that we do not stand with Black people. If anything, like, we would be there and would show up as much as we could. And also a lot of these people are the ones working in the fields, and they do not have the privilege to show up and organize and take time off of work. So I just wanted also to just echo what you're saying, Kagan. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you so much for speaking up.
Thank you for speaking up. And I had no way of meaning criticism when I said that, because I work with immigrants and I know this. I know that why they're afraid. And so I don't know how we can reach them in a different way, I guess is what I want,
Okay,
want to
we'll
say.
move on. I'm going to throw out another question from the chat here.
Oh, I didn't know you were looking, sorry. Emma, do you have a question that you're seeing that you want to raise? If there's folks who have other questions that they would like to address, please throw them in the chat.
There's Mike. Mike, you have something you want to jump in on?
Yeah. I have a question, since there are so many folks here. If people are seeing job actions, because that might be a way to, rather than asking people to come to your protest, you come to theirs. Or are there needs, for example, like safety gear for so many farm workers right now, and I know there was a job action in Albany at a packing plant, and I just wonder if people keep their eyes open and track any of that. And that's my question.
Is this a moment where, is there anyone involved in the Wallula plant organizing that wants to share a quick story about what that's looked like? And I apologize, and that might just be Emma. But it does feel like a relevant story that might be worth sharing out really quickly. Don't all jump in at once.
I'm sorry, was that Wallowa? Is that what you were looking for?
Yes.
No, Wallula. Plant in Wallula.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like it might be me on the phone. But in Wallula, Washington, which is between Hermiston and Tri-Cities, Washington, there's a Tyson meatpacking plant that has 1,400 workers at it, and currently at least 260 of them have tested positive for coronavirus. And so workers have been showing up, workers' family members have been organizing, and folks in the community have been coming together to push for safety precautions because Tyson has been completely disregarding the health and safety of their workers. So folks have been talking with local elected officials, with state and county and decision makers, and the governor of Washington, as well as folks on the Oregon side, because workers live on both sides of that state border and work at that plant, trying to push for protective equipment, trying to push for childcare for people, and just getting information in languages that people speak. There's 11 languages at least spoken at the plant. So there's a lot of work going on around making sure that people get the benefits that they are supposed to have access to, but all the systems are in English, so they aren't able to apply on their own. And holding vigil and working to bring more and more workers together to really push for Tyson to implement the safety precautions that the CDC and national folks are saying are necessary to protect people from coronavirus, but Tyson has so far ignored.
Thanks, Emma. I'm going to move to the next question, which is, I'm just going to actually go back to the agenda. What would be the top racial justice priority for your group that you'd like to take collective action on with other folks across the state? Everybody get that question?
Hey, hey, I'm Sahaki. I'm in Silverton, Oregon. And that question for me, I have a lot of friends who are school teachers, and we've been talking about basically decolonizing the libraries at the schools. And just like here in Silverton, when Trump was elected, there was a lot of racism in the high school, and just a lot of kids experienced a lot of shit, basically. And so just like accountability, I guess, to with the school boards and the school system about like, okay, they said they're going to do these action steps. Like, how do we keep the pressure on? How do we keep the heat on them to like make school safe for kids of color? So that's what I want to work on.
Thank you. Somebody else ready to jump in here?
I personally would like to see mandatory body cams and like actual repercussions if body cams malfunction or are turned off. I'd also like to see non-internal investigations when police brutality claims are brought up.
Citizen Review Board, at least.
Naomi, I see your question in the chat box. Has anyone started working on the demand to defund and terminate contracts with police locally? Do you want to expand on that, or does anyone want to answer that?
I'm going to add another question or thing that I'd like to focus on. I put this in the chat as well. My understanding about tonight's call was, what do you do with these neo-Nazi alt-right presence that are threatening and moving in and inciting violence? And I'd really like to focus on that question of the 3%ers and the Joey Nations and the alt-right and the neo-Nazi white supremacist presence in my community and in everybody's community. I mean, not just at protests where they're standing around with guns, trying to intimidate and make the argument that we're here to protect businesses. I'm sorry, that's not actually legal. That's why we have business insurance. But also, you know, driving around in the community with flying a Confederate flag and flying other symbols of neo-Nazi associations, and just generally being threatening to not only just regular, you know, old ladies like me, but more importantly to anybody that would suggest that they should not be doing what they're doing, and that would stand up and argue with them. You know, particularly communities of color. It's just, it's scary and it's terrifying, and I don't know what to do with it. And I would like to figure out how to make it stop. And I would hope that we could have that conversation tonight.
Well, I think that's, we would love to have as much of that conversation as possible tonight. And honestly, that is a multi-day, if not multi-week or month conversation for us all to be navigating. And I apologize, we have some noise in the background. Hopefully it's not too distracting, y'all. Quickly, there's a number of folks who are on this call who I believe are in communities really on the front lines of massive mobilizations of hundreds and hundreds of armed folks that are really mobilizing around these false rumors that are being perpetuated, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing in my own community of Cottage Grove by the far right, in order to continue to incite and encourage, I believe, our local police department and likely others as well, to really crack down on leftist and progressive and radical organizing for Black lives. And I think that is a very big thing to unpack. We don't have any magic wands. So we're gonna have to share some strategies and some tactics together in order to get there. I don't wanna put anyone on the spot, but I certainly would love to open it up if there's folks who have thoughts or ideas who really are on those front lines, who have tried some things, who have seen some things. Again, I don't want to put you on the spot, Bree, but you had named in Klamath. We similarly are seeing, you know, the threat of mobilization in a number of other communities as well. And so I think there's a lot of folks looking to Klamath Falls to learn from what you all have done.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say.
So like I said, I was only there for 2 nights and I only engaged for a couple of hours. But one of the things that was most impactful during this standoff was, because it was on opposite sides of the road, it was very like Western and uncomfortable and just, ugh. But a lot of folks on the protester side would walk over to the militia side and be like, hey, we're out here doing our, you know, First Amendment rights, and we're really glad that you're out here doing your Second Amendment rights, you know, to defend us in our First Amendment rights, you know, and we flipped the script on them, and they were like, oh shit, sorry, but they were like, oh geez, like we are out here protecting them, aren't we? Like, oh, we are all out here like doing our constitutional rights stuff. And so like, and I know it's definitely not the place for people of color and certainly not the place for Black folks to be doing this, but for our white privileged bodies to go over there and find common ground. And like, because as uncomfortable as they make us, they are people, and generally they have decent morals, although probably pretty misled. And so if we can go over there and find common ground and like appreciate that they're there defending us from tyranny or whatever, it'll make them think about why they're there. They're not really there to protect businesses. They're really there to make sure that the cops aren't doing crazy stuff, even though they probably are siding with the cops. And so it's just, I don't have a lot of solutions for it, but that's what worked for us. And that was part of our de-escalation process, was just talking with folks, finding that common ground and being like, hey, like, let's not make it about our feelings and let's just be excited here. We're all expressing our constitutional rights. Like, let's just do that together.
I think that's really helpful. I've been doing this in Southern Oregon for about 15 years, and every protest I've been to, we've had small groups or larger groups of armed white men showing up to try to intimidate folks. And I think the cookies and water strategy is helpful also. It's like, oh, you guys look like you're hot over here. Let's have some water. Let's chat a little bit. Again, I think it takes some of us white folks to cross over to that other side. And I'm not really looking for common ground, but I do want them to see my humanity.
Exactly.
And I think if I offer them cookies and water, it helps change the energy.
Right, because they realize that we're also humans. We're not just, you know, the Antifa or whatever rumors that they heard on Facebook. We're actual human beings with, you know, we care. And so humanizing each other, I think, has been really helpful.
Thanks, Bree. I appreciate you.
So, hey, it's Sahaji again. In Silverton tomorrow, the Silverton Youth Movement, it's basically a group of high schoolers, is putting on a demonstration, protest. And it's been interesting. I'm a business owner in town, right downtown. And so today I put up a sign in my window, Black Lives Matter. And I'm just like trying to publicly put myself out there as a business owner, especially in the downtown area. There's a lot of fear. And I think what Ajama was talking to about the psychology of safety, that's one thing I'm really trying to engage in is like turning it around, especially with other business owners. Like I basically today just said to quite a few of them, we have to stay united. We cannot let this divide us, because there's been someone walking around downtown spreading rumors and like there was a guy with a whole bunch of bricks that came into town, like an actual worker with bricks in his truck, that the police got called to come and investigate why there was bricks being brought into town. Just crazy shit. And so I think just having like steady psychology of this is not what we're doing. We are strong. We are united. This is our community. I don't care who comes in. They want to bash my window in. Okay, I'm here to support these kids who are wanting to tell their stories. We have to stand behind these kids and put them in they want to be heard. And so that's what I'm just trying to like stay in the background and help with that psychology of safety. Especially as a business owner, I feel like more business owners in rural communities need to be talked to, need to be working together, need to be working through the fear. And that only happens by like going and like really knocking on doors and being with each other. So that's been one of my things I've been trying to do this week, is just really, really talk to other business owners downtown.
I want to lift up a comment we got in the chat box from someone who had to jump off, but Sun Olson writes, I did want to say I'm here representing a coastal town called Coos Bay. We are having a rally this weekend and are facing a lot of backlash from the right-winged groups, including multiple threats with guns and weapons. This area has a 1% Black population, and we as allies are trying to gather together to support our tiny percentage of Black folks and other POC. My group is curious to know how to use proper language in our rally so as not to misrepresent. I hope this weekend's events will create a more permanent group of diverse people willing to create an independent civilian review committee in this small town. This town is full of neo-Nazis and Confederate flag-flying people, but there are people who want to stand up to the hate and create a space of love here on the Southern Oregon coast. If anyone has any help, insight, or tips regarding any of what I just said, my email is sun.co@gmail.com, and I appreciate you all, and I'm so proud to help begin this global change. And I've seen a few other people in the chat box also saying, we're trying to start a group, we don't know what to do, we want some support. And ROP can definitely help you create a local group in your town or your county. So definitely reach out to us after this. We'd love to put you in touch with your local ROP organizer and help you get a group started.
I wanted to speak to something interesting that happened when talking about kind of humanity and connecting with folks that are on the other side. I did see, I had my eye on a man who was at one of the vigils who looked a little, a little out of place. He was like with another guy, had some of the, to me, signifiers and insignia that made me think, okay, he's not on our side. I saw him walking up to people and starting conversations, and I went to listen in. And what he was actually saying was that he was there exactly for that reason, that, I disagree with you, but I, support your right to express yourself. And I'm a conservative man, but I'm here to just let you know that I'm standing with you. And he didn't have all of, the correct language that we would use probably, and said some things that were, problematic within that statement, but it was a really interesting moment. So I think that is possible to find some, I don't know, there's some folks that you can connect with. I wouldn't maybe want him in my house, but he's a real person. So I just want to share that. Oops.
I'm echoing that, Emily. When I was there the second night, I call them the Boogaloos. We had 6 Boogaloos show up, and they were like, we don't support your movement whatsoever, but we support that you're out here, and we understand that cops can get violent, and that's why we're here. So it is, I understand that it's rare, probably more rare in bigger cities than it is in smaller towns, but good but misguided people exist on that side.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit confusing, I think, too, like we were talking earlier about like not overreacting to folks, but it's still somebody I would kind of want to keep an eye on, that safety culture within our events. So I wanted to share that as like a possibility for things you guys might run into as well.
We have a question in the chat box wanting to welcome any high school students of color here who are with us to share what they're experiencing or working on in their communities.
Anybody ready to jump in there?
I can jump in. I'm not a high school student. I'm a graduate student of public health. And I'm in Elaine, Oregon. So Bree, I'm in Klamath County, and I was not at the protest, but definitely I saw the videos and the sentiments of the divide between just down on Main Street. So thank you for sharing. And I came on this call. This is my first call that I've been on with this organization. And I came on because I'm a student in New York City, I'm a master's in public health candidate. So coming back home to a very different environment and different conversations, I'm really trying to figure out how to educate and bring awareness, not just within my own family, because I'm having those very tough conversations with my family, but also with the people in my town, because the priorities are very different right now. I don't know if any of you have heard or have seen the rally, the first farmers stand with the farmers, and the agriculture protests that are happening around the water issues. So I think there's a lot of tension there on where priorities stand, and people feeling like you can't stand for one and stand for the other at the same time. And I think I'm just trying to figure out how I can voice my opinion effectively and also bring and amplify black people and black voices, because something that is not prominent. And so yeah, I just came here to learn, to hear what people are doing. And I'm really happy that you talked, Kayla. And we do need to amplify those black voices and the black experiences if people are willing to talk, because they have been screaming for centuries of what's going on for over 400 years, and people are tired. And so it's our turn to step up. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to do that.
See who that was.
This chat box is going off. Oh my goodness, so many people going back and forth reacting to things people are saying and things other people are chatting about. We have someone saying it's important to keep our implicit bias in mind when we're in protests or interacting with people that we don't know. We have folks asking or lifting up the importance of understanding Oregon's history and why, and lifting up a resource from Walida Imarisha, who has there's a link in here to why aren't there more Black people in Oregon, which is a good history piece of reference for folks that want to learn more about Oregon's history and racial exclusion in our state.
I guess if it hasn't come up, I'd like to talk about the action in Medford on Monday.
Go for it.
So about 1,500 people turned out. We took over downtown for just about 12 hours. Marched, the crowd marched in the streets. There was some tension about that. It did start as a Facebook account started by, one white person. I didn't know the person, and I think I heard about it like on Sunday or maybe Saturday. I heard it was happening. It was entirely peaceful protests. There was a lot of discipline and a lot of just like people that, to me, it seemed like a lot of high school kids came out, but not only, and a lot of just like people that looked like they'd maybe never been to a protest before, having just like real conversations about like, can we march in this lane or should we not? Is that provoking? Is that not? Just everybody just kind of knew, and just really like there was so much respect and there was so much like de-escalation going on like within the crowd. There was some disagreement about the ACAP signs in the beginning. This is just something I heard, that there was an attempt to eject people for going too aggressively against the police, but it became pretty quickly. It was like a lot of people had ACAP signs in the crowd. It was a good angry energy, but it was not. The newspaper reported no graffiti happened. So it went pretty peacefully, and then the local police took a hands-off approach. So we barely saw any cops actually for the first, I think until maybe around 5 o'clock, which is when I think the official event was scheduled to end. I can't say much for speakers because honestly I didn't hear any speakers. I was on the edges of the crowd the whole time. And then I stepped away for a couple hours when two of like the most like egregious violence that we saw, because as someone who was involved in de-escalation, one of the de-escalation teams that kind of just put themselves together in the last minute. A lot of people had de-escalation trainings from various organizations around, like the Rogue Action Center, Community Alliance of Tenants, and just some of like the local activist network. They basically, those who had the training got some yellow vests and basically just started directing traffic. Away, to turn off away from the crowd. But there was a lot, like I couldn't count the number of times that a car tried to ram through the crowd. Cars, trucks, circle back. We didn't see anybody armed for the first couple hours, actually. The militias, like a popular Facebook group here, the scanner group, the police scanner group, someone posted on there about assemble in the parking garage, which was like within the loop of the march. And
Hey Graham, thanks so much for sharing. We want to make sure we have as many voices as possible. Is there one last piece you want to include before we go to the next person?
Just that, there are still like various events organized, but basically it's a lot of different people organically just doing things on their own, And it'd be great to just connect among all those people that were involved, because a lot of people were really active and did really great work. And a lot of people brought a lot of supplies and preparation and planning.
Awesome. I see Whitney and Francis, you both have your hands up if one of you wants to come off mute.
I didn't mean to.
Sorry. So, can you guys all hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, my name's Whitney. I am from Albany, Oregon. I work in the school district. And just recently, our superintendent has declared that our school district has racism and that certain faculty members of our school district are racist. And like, I want to be a positive representation of my school district and let children who attend our school and their family members know this is a safe place and that we can overcome racism, and that's not what we want the face of our school district to be. And I just felt so horrified that our superintendent would publicly declare that during such a sensitive time. So because of that, I've been asking a lot of my African American friends and friends who've adopted African American children, like, what can I do in my personal life to try to be a positive influence in my community besides just going to rallies and showing my support? And they said, well, what we live with on a regular basis is just fear of walking out our front door, fear of our kids leaving our homes, and just knowing that there is places that are not safe for us. And it's like, what would be helpful is if you would present yourself as a friendly person, as a person that's like, hey, I see you in the store, or I see you at school, or I'm an employee with you at work, and I am here to stand behind you to make sure that you are safe, that your children are safe, and I'm here to just, be that witness and be that help. And I feel like that's one way, if people don't have time for rallies or protests or any of that, that they can implement things like that into their personal lives. Just being aware of our community and backing up the people who are of a different race than ourselves and showing them our support in just our daily walk.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm afraid we are at that time, and we really want to respect everyone's time. We know that this has been a jam-packed call. We knew, coming from a lot of our groups and a lot of the folks that we've worked with for a long time, that security was one of the biggest priorities. We have heard some really great feedback and some direction around some next steps. We also have some incredible folks who were on this call who are excited to share more resources, so we will make some of that happen. I saw a lot of enthusiasm, so we'll be following up about that. We also see a lot in here asking questions, all from how do I get an event organized? How do I start? How do I find my people in my community? How do we get rolling? How do we really move in an accountable way to leadership of color and Black folks in our community and in our county in this work? Those are incredible questions, great questions. And how ROP works as a network is we take the leadership of you all and we follow the direction of what folks need most in their communities and in their work. So we hear that there's that layer of work, as well as how are we diving into really creating a culture of safety and security within our movement, within our spaces. How are we building out between counties and across regions? All of these are really incredible pieces of work that we are excited to follow up on. We, of course, we're using this as a listening session, so we don't have anything ready yet, but we're gonna share out notes, we're gonna share out the recording, and please stay tuned. We're definitely going to convene more of these calls because it's clear folks are super hungry for resources and with connection to each other, and we're excited to learn from you all and with you all in the process. So I just wanted to say that explicitly. I'm sorry this call couldn't be everything that we could possibly cover in this moment. We know that there's a lot going on. Also know that we have a staff of ROP organizers spread out across the state who are enthusiastic to work alongside and support your group's capacity building and work as much as we can. So please don't be shy about reaching out to us. We're happy to problem solve. We're happy to share resources. We're happy to connect you with other folks in your region. Just give us a shout. You can email us at office@rop.org and find us on any other number of places. So I just wanted to say that directly. Thanks y'all so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Emma to close us out the rest of the way.
Great. Thanks so much. I think you said about all that we wanted to say in the closing. So we're available. Please reach out if you need us. And we're just so thankful for everyone participating so fully and sharing in all the ways that you all are sharing and showing up in this moment. So with that, we'll say good night.